Support for this podcast comes from TextKernel, where the future of recruitment meets the power of AI, helping you connect people and jobs better. Are you ready to take your talent acquisition game to the next level? Look no further than TextKernel, the global leader in AI technology that helps staffing, commercial and government organisations make sense of data and find the right talent effortlessly. If you're looking to connect the right people with the right jobs, TextKernel's AI-powered software makes sourcing and matching easier than ever before. For over 22 years, TextKernel has been helping professionals like you streamline and optimize sourcing, recruitment, and talent management processes. With their suite of solutions, you can easily collect and analyze workforce data, manage your talent pipeline, enhance candidate engagement, and automate time-consuming tasks. From simplifying CV parsing and enriching data to intelligent job matching and labour market insights, they've got you covered. The best part? TextKernel seamlessly integrates with popular CRM and ATS platforms such as Salesforce, Bullhorn, SAP SuccessFactors, Oracle, Talentsoft, Cornerstone, and more, saving you time and resources so you can focus on what matters most. Join the ranks of top corporate HR and staffing teams who trust TextKernel, including companies like Manpower, Netflix, and Kelly. Their AI-powered technology has proven its worth in the industry. Ready to unlock recruitment success? Visit textkernel.com. That's TextKernel.com and discover how their solutions can revolutionize the way you can connect people and jobs better and faster and with more confidence.
There's been more of scientific discovery, more of technical advancement and material progress in your lifetime and mine than in all the ages of history.
Hi there, this is Matt Alder. Welcome to episode 527 of the Recruiting Future podcast. The employee-employer relationship is changing. Employee engagement is at an all-time low, and countless research studies tell us that a significant proportion of the workforce is considering quitting their job. At the same time, despite the economic backdrop, many companies are struggling to get the talent they need due to significant skill shortages in some areas. So, how can employers differentiate themselves to secure and retain the talent they need? A positive work culture has never been more critical, and it's a strong differentiator for the employers focusing on building one. My guest this week is Lori Knowles, Chief Human Resources Officer at Memorial Hermann Health System. Memorial Hermann has had some spectacular hiring and retention outcomes in a highly challenging talent market by focusing on their culture. In our discussion, Lori talks us through the 5 levers they use to drive culture and the results they're getting. Hi, Lori, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Matt. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
An absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Please, could you introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do?
Happy to. I am Lori Knowles. I am the Chief Human Resources Officer at Memorial Hermann Health System. That's in Houston, Texas. Memorial Hermann is a large integrated health delivery system. We have 17 hospitals, about 32,000 employees, 300 different care delivery sites. So really large in a very, very large geographic area. In my role, I've been at Memorial Hermann, almost 12 years now, but doing HR for a lot longer than that. And in my role as in human resources, I know every organization is set up a little different. So I have oversight of sort of the typical areas: total rewards, talent learning and development, talent acquisition. We actually have a central staffing model that's a talent float pool that we may want to get to here in a little bit. I have workforce programs, employee relations, occupational health. One thing that's interesting about the HR structure at Memorial Hermann, and that is unique probably to healthcare for those of your listeners who aren't in healthcare, is that chaplaincy and spiritual care report up through HR. And so that's a unique opportunity to really get a lot of different viewpoints into sort of whole person health. And so we feel very lucky to have that group in our HR family.
Yeah, absolutely. Really interesting stuff. Tell us a bit about the current challenges that are going on in the health sector.
Sure, happy to. Well, we all know we're coming out of COVID, but certainly healthcare was heavily influenced by COVID in the ways that many other industries were, and all of us were, in terms of the disruption to our lives, but particularly in healthcare because of our role in treating COVID and really being frontline workers. It was particularly difficult and had some pretty long-lasting impacts on the workforce projections in healthcare. So before COVID, there was already an RN labor, a nursing shortage, if you will. There's been a nursing shortage for at least the last 15 to 20 years. But because many nurses left the bedside during COVID because of the stress, or they left nursing altogether, it has really exacerbated that workforce shortage. So, and then in Texas, we have one of the lowest nurse per capita rates in the country. And so it's particularly difficult in Texas. And in Houston, we actually have the largest medical center in the world. And so we have a lot of healthcare in Houston with a lot of workforce shortages. So that's probably primarily one of the challenges that healthcare faces. I think also healthcare figuring out what the right role of this workforce flexibility is, remote working. You know, you're not, when you're a direct patient caregiver, there's no opportunity for remote work, but that doesn't mean that the expectations for flexibility and thinking about things differently is any different. And so having to be creative, I think, is a challenge for sure. Workforce demographics, we're all facing that. In healthcare, it's exacerbated a little bit because we've got a lot of need at the entry-level position range, and a lot of the clinical schools aren't equipped to process and handle the amount of students that we would need to put through that. So really thinking through what is a different way to think about staffing, roles, skills, balancing jobs, workflows. It's really different because we cannot rely on having the number of licensed clinical staff that perhaps we've had in the past. So I think those are some that are specific to healthcare. Obviously, everyone who's listening is dealing with, a lot of challenges related to the social dynamics in our world today: social justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, ESG. Those kinds of things are always challenges to deal with. And then I think the biggest thing that's fundamentally shifted is this difference in employee-employer deal, if you will. And so I'm hoping we're going to talk a little bit more about that, because our human capital strategy at Memorial Hermann is heavily based in that concept.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is so much there that we could dig into. We could be here for hours, and it would all be a fantastic conversation. Let's dig into that last one, as you said. Just before we do, though, tell us a little bit more about your talent acquisition structure, because that sounded quite interesting.
Sure. Yeah. So talent acquisition is made up. The way we're structured in talent acquisition, as many people are, is we are very heavily job, family, and role based. So we have 6 teams that focus on specific job families, and sourcing, recruiting, just like all of your talent acquisition listeners out there. We also have what we call a central staffing pool. And so we have had this for about almost 20 years now. And it's a pool of about 1,000 people at Memorial Hermann that are supplemental or per diem and pick up shifts either on a contract basis, so maybe for 6 weeks or 13 weeks, but they're Memorial Hermann employees, or they pick up a shift. Maybe they work full time for someone else, but they're willing to pick up a weekend shift or, a few shifts here and there, a night shift for us. And so our central staffing department recruits those people, but also manages them. So works extremely closely with all of our hospitals and our care delivery sites to figure out where we have needs and how do we be strategic with just-in-time staffing? So, if we have one hospital that is staffed to care for a certain number of patients, and for whatever reason, those patients, we don't have that number of patients that day, how do we shift those employees to perhaps another area that is that has more needs? That group also manages all of our agency and contract staffing. So the contracts for agency workers, the bill rates, the payment mechanisms, all of that, that group manages. And then the third thing I think that's interesting is we have what we would call an internal travel pool. So in healthcare, one of the dynamics that happened during COVID was the rise of the agency staff. So, tremendous amount of dollars poured into agency contracts because hospital systems had tremendous needs that they had not had before for staff. And so prices just went through the roof for agency staffing. People left full-time employment to go chase that, larger dollars. And so we really needed a strategy to help us combat that. And so we created what we call an internal travel pool that is a unique deal, I would say, with people who are willing to do that for a higher rate of pay. There's a lot more flexibility required. And so we've been playing with that for about a year, and it's been very, very successful for us. So that is something that we see as a real advantage and something that we plan to expand.
And I suppose that brings us back to what you were talking about in terms of that sort of changing employee-employer relationship. Talk us through that part of things, and how you're sort of facing up with dealing with some of these challenges.
Yeah. So here's the way I think about it. All of us have jobs, probably, and so when we think about what do I want from my employer, right? If I'm looking to make a change, or maybe I'm just entering the workforce and I think, what is it that I want? Obviously, the first thing people think of is, well, I need to make some decent money. I need the pay matters a lot. But that's not the only thing. And I think as employers for a very long time, we focus so much on pay and benefit programs. You can't see me, but I'm quoting programs. That we kind of miss the mark on this idea of when I go to work, it is really an experience. It's an experience just like, the experience I get in my family, the experience I have with my friends, the experience I get when I, think about buying a car. It's all those things that make me feel a certain way, make me feel valued. There's proof points that my voice is being heard. I can be inspired by something. It's something that I want to be aligned with, that aligns with my values. And I think COVID, the experience of COVID really brought it all to life, where we said, you know what, this is not, we can no longer just be the employer and ask the employee to leave their personal life at the door. We have to realize that what we are providing is an actual experience. How do we think about the moments that really matter in that experience and design and be intentional about providing what people need in a much bigger way than we've had to do before?
Absolutely. And how does that feed into things like defining culture?
So when you think about, for us, there's always this talk about we need to drive our culture to a certain point, or we need to think about culture in a certain way. And for me, it starts with, what do you want to be? Who do you want to be to your community? Who do you want to be to your staff? Who do you want to be to your leaders? And then when you pair that with your mission and your vision of your organization, your culture becomes, or the right culture becomes pretty self-evident, right? So you can't just think about culture all by itself. It has to be tied to those things. So if you think about, Memorial Hermann's mission, right? So we're community owned, meaning that we are nonprofit and our community owns us. So being responsive to our community is absolutely part of who we are and what we need to do. So, okay, if we want to be responsive to our community, what does that mean? What type of culture does that mean we need to have? Well, it means you need to be transparent. It means we need to hold ourselves to a higher standard in terms of the care we provide. It means we need to have mechanisms to hear from our community. It means we need to support our community, have clear ways to reach into our community. And so when you start to think about culture like that, it starts to become pretty evident that there are certain levers that you can pull to drive certain things, reward certain things, and then also sort of de-emphasize others. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. Tell us about those levers.
Yeah. So the way we think about it really as 5 different levers to drive culture. And I'll talk about them in order. So the first is how we hire and how we onboard, right? You want to think about who is it that is going to be right for your culture, not just now, but with that vision in mind, right? If you want to be, for us, our service standard, we have very strong service standards. And the very first one is safe. The second one is caring. The third one is personalized. The fourth one is efficient. How do you select for those things? And then if you say you want those characteristics and you select for that and you interview for that, and then you onboard and those tenants don't show up in your onboarding, you're saying one thing and doing something different. And I think that's the death knell of culture, right? When you have a lot of things on a poster and then people look around and go, but that's not what you do. And so how we hire and onboard is absolutely critical. And we've got a lot of work happening around that. I think the other thing is the second one is how we lead and what we teach. So if we say that safe, caring, personalized, and efficient are our service standards, how are we weaving that into our leadership competencies? How are we holding leaders accountable for role modeling those behaviors? What are we teaching in our, just, think about leadership development courses or even huddles, daily huddles that you have in your teams where you want to impart information. How are you weaving those things in? And then the third one is how and what we communicate to reinforce. I use this example a lot because if you say your voice matters, right? Your voice matters. We want to hear from you. We have a culture of transparency, but you only do an annual engagement survey maybe once a year and there's really no other place for people to have their voice heard. You're not authentic. So you've got to figure out how do we, if we say we want to be transparent, how do we show up and be transparent? How do we ask people for their opinions? What do we do with that information? How do we do it on daily meetings, in group settings, one-on-one? So it's carefully and intentionally thinking about how you communicate, your forums, right? If all of your communication tools, we do monthly town halls. We used to do them every week in COVID, but now we do them. If those town halls, they have myself and our CEO and others on the call, our COO, let's just say we didn't enable the Q&A function. Let's just say it was just one-way communication. What message does that send? So I think it's really just sort of walking the talk is what I'm getting at. And then obviously how you reward and recognize, right? Do you have mechanisms to say, hey, I saw you being safe. Hey, I really appreciate the way you personalize the experience for that family member or that fellow employee. And are you building those things in to say loud and clear, this is what good looks like. This is what we value. And so this is what we reward. But, and the fifth lever is how we hold accountable. If we don't see those behaviors, we address them because, your team, and you all know this, your team is as strong as your weakest link. And if you as a leader or a fellow team member see that behavior, it's one thing if it's skilled, right? You've got people who don't quite know how to do something yet. That's the easy part, right? I can teach you to do that. But if I say I want a caring environment and I've got a caregiver that is dismissive to a patient or a patient family, I need to be strong and courageous enough to be able to address that in real time. All those things build culture because all of those things are proof points, right? It's something an employee can look at and say you want to be X, but are you? And it's just really building in using those 5 levers. And, other people may have 3 or 5 or whatever, but for us, these 5 work because we can target it back and we can evaluate ourselves as we drive our culture efforts to say, are we building in these 5 levers?
And talk to us about the impact of that. What kind of results are you seeing? I suppose particularly around being able to attract talent and also crucially being able to retain talent.
We've had a lot of work on this over the last couple of years, and so we are seeing some really very positive results. I'll start on the sort of how we hire and onboard piece. Our applicant pool is incredibly diverse, and we mark that as a measure of success, right? For me, is your message getting across? Is your reputation in the community such that you say you value everyone? Are they really applying to work with you? And so our applicant pool is very, very diverse. And as in almost 80% people of color, which is very representative of our community. Again, if we say we're community owned, we need to reflect what our community looks and feels like. So I would say that is a real mark. We have had 20 to 25% increase in hiring for 3 years running. And we hire about somewhere between 13 and 14,000 people a year. And that number is up from, in the past few years, 11,000, 12,000. So it's a very high volume. But being able to have that success in a challenging workforce, I think is really important. We also look at satisfaction. So, hiring manager satisfaction, candidate satisfaction, your listeners probably do that as well. Our survey is on a 5-point scale. Our average response is a 4.6 on a 5-point scale. So I feel really good about that. I also am very pleased with turnover. Our turnover is down by, more than half from where we were during COVID. And so when I look at how we stack up against healthcare industry benchmarks, we're in top decile. So we're in the top 10% in the country for turnover, both for all staff and nursing. So I feel really good about that. And I'm a firm believer that people vote with their feet and culture is a big driver of that. So I feel good about what turnover says about our culture efforts. And then I also think engagement. So we do engagement surveys. We do pulse surveys, ask a lot of questions of our staff. But our engagement, again, is much, much better than industry average, both in healthcare and non-healthcare. And as a matter of fact, I think our latest, I think we're at like 77th percent. So it's not 95. I would love to be 95 or higher, but I feel pretty good about that given where we are. And our leadership turnover has gone down. We have really good tenure with leaders. We have really good internal promotion rates. Over 40% of our leadership jobs at the very first entry level get filled internally. So, those are good metrics that I like to look at and pay attention to that I feel are indicators of culture.
Absolutely. There's some very impressive numbers there. What role does technology play in all of this? How have you sort of deployed HR and recruiting technologies to really sort of drive the strategy for you?
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, Matt. And HR technology is moving at a pace that I think we're all a little blown away by. But one of the things that we recently implemented, almost a year ago now, I guess, was new AI technology in talent acquisition. Because of our volumes, like so far this year, just this fiscal year, and we run on a July 1 to a June 30 fiscal year. So for us, we're almost finished with our fiscal year. But we've had over 145,000 applications come through. And when you think about trying to process through that level of applications, I think just by nature, there's just no way. I mean, I would have to have 500 recruiters to be able to get through that. And so the AI technology has been great for us because when you bump the job description against the resume and the application, our AI technology assigns a fit score. It also stack ranks the candidates so that our recruiters know, listen, because we have an expectation that you get to a resume or application within 48 hours that it's submitted. And so our recruiters know if there's some you need to get back to right away, these are the top 20. So that's been very helpful. The other thing that tool is a much better CRM than we've had in the past, and it allows recruiters to launch campaigns themselves and allows a lot of communication back and forth between candidates, much more than we've ever had. Actually allowed us to get rid of some other tools because there's a lot of video interviewing and texting capabilities that are there that maybe we've had to have separate solutions for in the past. So I think in terms of efficiency, it's been great. It's also been proven to have no built-in bias. So, there is a lot of talk about whether AI technologies have some flaws in terms of unintentionally inserting bias. And this particular tool doesn't. We've had it looked at separately outside from a legal perspective. And then we've also really needing their own internal studies was an important piece in the selection. So I would say that. We also recently put in AI and IVR technology into our HR shared services team because we get a lot of calls from employees and our wait times were not what we wanted. And so we have decreased our wait time by 300% since we put in that technology, and we have a containment rate of 15% for that. So I think those are two examples of where we've really stepped up our use of technology in the last year and had some very, very good results.
Final question for you. What does the future look like? It's obviously been a very disruptive few years. What's your vision for the future? How do you think things will move forward from here?
Well, I have a lot of dreams for our future. I believe absolutely 100% committed to our mission and the mission in the industry of healthcare because it's just such a meaningful place to be. And I think healthcare has turned the corner in terms of understanding that it's not just about quality outcomes. That's table stakes. That is absolutely what we have to do, but it's about the experience. And so I think we've embraced that. And I'm very excited because we're really talking a lot about patient experience. We're talking about employee experience. We're talking about moments that matter. And when you do that, I think it just opens up the future to a world where people can feel really tied and connected to the work that they do, and they can continue to see how work enhances their life. It's not just a part of their life.
Lori, thank you very much for talking to me.
You are very welcome.
My thanks to Lori. You can subscribe to this podcast in Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or via your podcasting app of choice. Please also follow the show on Instagram. You can find us by searching for Recruiting Future. You can search all the past episodes at recruitingfuture.com. On that site, you can also subscribe to our monthly newsletter, Recruiting Future Feast, and get the inside track about everything that's coming up on the show. Thanks very much for listening. I'll be back next time, and I hope you'll join me.
This is my show.
Welcome, change agents, to your go-to place for stories that ignite your spirit, fuel your purpose, and connect us all. We believe in the incredible power of the human spirit, its boundless resilience, and the inspiration it brings to our lives. On the Driving Change podcast, we'll journey together through the extraordinary yet very relatable experiences of some of the most amazing people on earth. Our mission? That through these stories, we might just spark change within you and awaken a newfound motivation to harness your unique gifts to make a real difference in the world. So get ready to be inspired and join us on this incredible adventure. You can find the Driving Change podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you love listening to your favorite podcasts.